Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're not just looking back at the timeline of September 11th, 2001. We're going to step right inside the collision of human intent, sprawling bureaucracies, and global power that actually made it possible. We'll explore how one single morning shattered an entire era, completely rewired the American state, and unleashed historical forces that we are, quite frankly, still grappling with today. Let's dive in. History is never just inevitable. In the tense, really uncertain summer of 2001, the outcomes were entirely unknown. The United States was this undisputed global superpower. And yet, as then CIA Director George Tenet later recalled, the system was blinking red. There were intelligence intercepts, warnings, growing threats from al-Qaeda. So how does a nation with such vast resources completely miss the signs? How do you possess all the puzzle pieces, but somehow lack the ability to actually put them together? Part 1. The system blinking red. To really understand how these attacks happened, we have to look at the systemic blind spots of the 1990s. The 9/11 Commission revealed a staggering failure, and it wasn't just a failure of a few individuals, but of a deeply entrenched bureaucratic culture. There was this legal barrier, they called it the wall, that basically blinded the system. It intentionally segregated foreign intelligence from domestic criminal investigators. It was a fatal, invisible architecture. Add in incompatible databases that essentially hoarded secrets instead of sharing them, along with incredibly weak, decentralized aviation screening, and you have a catastrophic failure of imagination. The dots were there, the structure itself simply prevented anyone from connecting them. Part 2. 102 minutes of chaos. Those precise structural vulnerabilities, they were violently exploited on a single Tuesday morning in what al-Qaeda internally called the Plains Operation. In a terrifyingly compressed 102 minutes, 19 hijackers enacted a horrifying tactical innovation, turning fully fueled commercial planes into guided kinetic weapons. The timeline is just breathless. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 strikes the North Tower. At 9:03, Flight 175 hits the South Tower. By 9:37, Flight 77 impacts the military heart of the nation, the Pentagon. And at 10:03, Flight 93 crashes in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, following a truly heroic passenger revolt. In under 2 hours, the entire U.S. airspace was forced into a paralyzing, completely unprecedented shutdown. The direct, immediate human cost of this systemic breach was devastating. 2,977 innocent lives lost across New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. It remains the deadliest terrorist assault in U.S. history, a staggering toll exacted on office workers, airline crews, and passengers who were caught entirely unaware in this massive clash of ideologies and structural failures. Part 3. The first responders' sacrifice. Down on the ground in Lower Manhattan, the chaos of the attacks instantly overwhelmed local emergency frameworks. As the towers burned, the response was crippled by a catastrophic technological failure. The Fire Department of New York and the NYPD simply lacked interoperable radios. With vital communications equipment trapped in the North Tower, unified command completely shattered. Imagine firefighters climbing higher and higher into the smoke, totally cut off, their overcrowded radios silent to the structural death sentence that was looming right above them. This technological friction culminated in an unfathomable human sacrifice. 415 emergency responders perished in the collapse. That included 344 firefighters and 71 law enforcement officers. These were men and women who stayed in extreme danger, fighting through the dark and the chaos, fully aware of the peril but absolutely committed to saving lives. Part 4. Toxic dust and lingering wounds. But the tragedy of Ground Zero didn't actually end when the towers fell. A silent epidemiological crisis had just begun. A slow-moving, secondary attack, really. Over 400,000 people were enveloped in a hazardous, thick gray dust. We're talking about a pulverized storm of building materials, industrial chemicals, and jet fuel residue. Decades later, the suffering continues. Over 33,000 responders and residents have been treated for illnesses, and nearly 50,000 cases of 9/11-related cancers have been certified. As one advocacy group starkly noted, more cops have actually died from illnesses linked to the attack than perished on the day itself. In response to this ongoing catastrophe, the Victim Compensation Fund was established. Processing over 100,000 claims, it's paid out more than $16 billion to injured responders, survivors, and their families. It represents this immense, almost desperate institutional effort to try and put a price on an unhealable, multi-generational wound. Part 5. Rewiring the American State. Now, if we zoom out from the human tragedy, we witness the most sweeping reorganization of the American national security apparatus since World War II. Almost overnight, the vulnerabilities of the 1990s were aggressively dismantled with dizzying speed. Those fragmented border agencies, they were forged into the monolithic Department of Homeland Security. Weak airport screening was entirely federalized under the TSA, which permanently altered how we travel. And to finally obliterate that intelligence wall we talked about earlier, the Director of National Intelligence was created to force centralization in data sharing across a vast, unified security state. The absolute centerpiece of this legal rewiring was the USA Patriot Act, passed with overwhelming bipartisan margins just weeks after the attacks. This rapid and sweeping bill was designed to bring surveillance out of the 1990s and modernize it for the digital age. It dramatically expanded the government's ability to search telephone, email, medical, and financial records. And wow, did this legislation ignite a fierce, profound philosophical clash, one we are still navigating today. On one side, you have the Department of Justice arguing these tools are absolutely crucial to connecting the dots, insisting you can't fight a digital age battle with antique weapons. But on the other side, civil rights organizations like the ACLU warn of severe executive overreach. They argue that putting domestic surveillance in the hands of a top spy and removing vital judicial checks really risks politicizing intelligence and eroding constitutional privacy. It's a fundamental debate over how a democracy should protect itself without losing its soul.
Part 6. The Endless War on Terror.
Beyond its domestic borders, the structural legacy of 9/11 fundamentally altered the entire global geopolitical order. Less than 10 days after the attacks, President George W. Bush drew a hard dividing line in modern history, declaring either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. He launched an open-ended global military campaign. This marked the dawn of the global war on terror, a campaign that began in Afghanistan, rapidly expanded into Iraq, and instantly scrambled global alliances. Operating under a sweeping authorization for use of military force, this continuous multi-decade war has exacted an unfathomable toll. The human scale is just vast. Research suggests it has resulted in over 4.5 million deaths and displaced millions more across the Middle East and beyond. It's wild to think about, but decisions made in the dusty ruins of Manhattan reshaped the trajectory of entire societies and completely defined the geopolitics of the 21st century.
So, as we look back on the permanent structural transformation of American life, from the creation of massive security bureaucracies to ongoing health crises and a totally changed global order, we are left with a monumental question. In a post-9/11 world, how do we balance the relentless pursuit of global national security with the preservation of our constitutional freedoms and basic human rights? It's an urgent, unresolved challenge for all of us today. Thank you for joining me for this explainer.